All right, everyone. I think we are live, which is pretty awesome. So greetings to everybody from Vancouver, Canada, on the beautiful West Coast in Vancouver. I'm pleased that everyone could join us today. We had an excellent RSVP rate for this shakeup, and so I'm honored to be here to talk to you today. Sort of a crash course in our advanced history and modernization of bitters as our favorite modifier to use in the cocktail world. Just a bit about me before we get started. My name is Lauren Mote, and I am the co-proprietor of Bittered Sling Bitters, which is a bitters that is produced right here in British Columbia, Canada. Our distillery is about 6 hours away from Vancouver. We have been honored with the task of many beautiful creations over the years and projects to do with our bitters company, but certainly a hallmark in the last 2 years would be working so closely with Tales of the Cocktail, and hence the reason why you're all tuned in today, and being tasked with this marvelous project of creating the first ever proprietary bitters for Tales of the Cocktail, celebrating all of the Tales on Tour places that we've done festivals together. The other person I'm referring to when I refer to we in the Bittered Sling family is my husband and partner in life, love, and crime. That would be Chef Jonathan Chavansek. We've been heading down to Tales almost every year since 2010, and Bittered Sling has found a beautiful place in the world of cocktails, both in Canada and the US, and we're honored to be event partners with Tales of the Cocktail. So we're going to jump right into this. I will assume that most people tuning in today have higher than a beginner level of understanding with bitters, so we're gonna stick around sort of the intermediate, and definitely we've got oh, hold on, I'm getting some questions here that people can hear me but they can't see me, so let me see if I can fix this quickly. 1 second, friends. Sorry about that. All right. Sorry guys, just 1 second, bear with me. There we are. Let me see. Video. Why is this? Let's see, video. There we go. I think we've got it. Hey, can you all see me? Okay, I've got the Q&A panel opened as well, so if anyone wants to write in with questions or comments, maybe just write in and say that you can see me. That would be really helpful as well. All these new technology programs. In any case, I can see video on my end, so it should be good on your end. So first things first, when we're talking about bitters and sort of our favorite modifier, and certainly for me, I've been bartending for over 15 years. It's been a really marvelous way for me to meet incredible people. Likewise, definitely bartenders, other bitters makers, people from around the world that are passionate about spirits, bitters, cocktails. Basically all things consumable, and that's why Tales of the Cocktail has always celebrated success on a year-to-year basis with their festival as well. So when we're talking about bitters, we are talking about extracts. I mean, if we were to loosely describe what bitters means, bitters are a synonym for extract. Some people have called them tinctures. Tinctures technically are one singular ingredient that are extracted to create one flavor. Extracts can be the same thing. Bitters over time in grocery have been referred to as vanilla extract, as probably the most classic example. Vanilla itself will add flavor and character to otherwise lifeless white flour, white sugar, and white butter. And that's why vanilla is such an integral ingredient when we're doing baking or cakes or cookies or anything like that. But vanilla on its own is really bitter, and it's not very delicious, but when it's added in the right proportion to the right series of ingredients, then all of a sudden it creates magic. And that's what bitters does to cocktails. Because bitters are not a singular ingredient. They are a combination of beautiful and wonderful ingredients that come together to add depth and complexity and to soften out the harsh edges of ingredients that create sort of the soft edge on acidity. They dry out the cocktail. They add a certain je ne sais quoi, which we can say in Canada because we all speak French, a certain je ne sais quoi to the cocktail to make it extraordinary. What we always like to say when we're talking about bitters is make 2 variations on a Manhattan. The first one is using 2 parts whiskey, 1 part sweet vermouth, and a couple of dashes of classic aromatic bitters. Make that same cocktail again without the bitters, and what are the differences? It's not necessarily that you notice the bitters there, it's that you notice when they're missing. And that is the most important thing to understand about bitters, is that variations in different flavors and styles of making bitters will do different things to a cocktail. So it's important to understand, I guess, the variations and the different styles of bitters and then use them accordingly. So potable versus non-potable. As you can see in this is one panel of my house wall. I have close to 500 bottles of spirits in my house. This is actually a bookshelf that I modified just for today. I've got lots of bitters. So these ones on this side, if you see the Chartreuse, the Strega, Campari, Suze, Ricard, there's a Saint Antonio liqueur and Drum Gemel up here. These are all potable bitters. So potable bitters are administered and consumed by ounces and full portions. Now you can enjoy those as part of a cocktail or on ice or just neat, or regardless of how you like to enjoy it. Non-potable bitters are items that are administered in dashes and drops. So that would be like our lineup, the Bittered Sling here. We've got the Suze bitters. We have a couple of generations of different classic bitters. We have the Peychaud bitters, Angostura, and also a variation on the original recipe for Abbott's bitters. So these are administered in dashes and drops in order to achieve that depth and complexity that you're looking for in a cocktail. And they're regulated differently through the federal government, depending on what country you live in. So in Canada and the United States, for example, we are regulated through the Food and Drug Administration in the US, and also Canadian Food Inspection Agency and Excise Duty in Canada and the US. So these are the branches of federal and provincial government that manage the use of alcohol for something that does not need to be sold in a liquor store like these items. So when we're talking about Bittered Sling, just as an example, if we're going to pay between $16 and $25 between wholesale and retail for a bottle of bitters, the government would like to make sure that if somebody walks into a grocery store and grabs a bottle of Bittered Sling off the shelf, that they're not going to crack the top and chug it and be underage, because they're sold in grocery. Angostura Bitters is a great example. This has been sold in grocery stores worldwide since its availability. It is 40% alcohol by volume. A lot of people don't notice that on the label, but it is an alcohol bitters. But I mean, if you've ever done shots of Angostura bitters, and I have, because I've run many bars and had a wide variety of different staff working for me, doing shots of bitters was not a weird thing for us. So, doing a shot of Angostura bitters is interesting, but it's not exactly pleasant. I would rather have something like Fernet, which is on the shelf somewhere here. Oh, just over here, which is kind of like the idea of having a non-potable bitters administered as a potable product. So that's the idea of what bitters are. Now, if you do write in and you ask questions, and I see that people are able to see me, so that's good, see and hear. So please don't end the shake-up. You want to be part of this. As we trickle along here, we've got a time limit of about an hour for this shake-up. There's also please travel to the Tales of the Cocktail Facebook page after today's shake-up, because they will be giving away to a couple of packs of our Tales of the Cocktail Bittered Sling Bitters, which celebrates the regions that we have been traveling with Tales of the Cocktail and celebrating terroir as our approach to building bitters with that in mind. So we have the Vancouver Gastown bitters, which are sort of like a celery and savory style. The Condesa bitters, which are inspired by Mexico City. So those would be a bit more like chili and chocolate, and a little bit more Latin American in style. But the chilies are aromatic; they're not spicy. Palermo celebrates Buenos Aires, which was a totally wicked trip. Tales of the Cocktail going on tour there for 2 years really gave people a chance to experience the bar culture and the excitement that was happening in Buenos Aires, that still is at the time, and a lot of bartenders that were part of that festival have still been part of the organization of the festivals going forward. And then lastly, the namesake. This is French Quarter. So this is a really beautiful Gentian, red Gentian bitters, which does taste delicious in a Sazerac or a Vieux Carré or a Sealback, anything that would normally call for our traditional red bitters. Peychaud works really, really well. And that's kind of like our celebration pack, and it's only available in very limited supplies with limited suppliers across Canada and the US. And so definitely go to the Facebook page after our shakeup. Okay, so when we're talking about bitters, it's important to talk about two things. We have to talk about the history of distillation very briefly to figure out how we got to this place, and then we also have to talk about the history of the cocktail. So if anyone that's been part of our industry as a bartender, as an enthusiast, writer, generally speaking, we will all be pulling from the same history lesson on when the word cocktail was first used and why and how and the circumstance and how we got to where we are today. So the cocktail first appeared in print in 1806 in the Hudson and Columbian Repository. And what happened in this paper, there was the editor had written back to a reader that had written in, what is this word cocktail? You keep referring to this in your copy. We don't understand. We need an explanation. So the editor wrote back and said, a cocktail is vulgarly described as a bittered sling, a combination of bitter spirits, water, and sugar, and works as an excellent electioneering potion. So basically, the editor was explaining that if you feed people alcohol and you combine alcohol with bitter, sugar, water, and spirits in such a way that you can get people to vote for who you want. So it was electioneering. It was, political in nature, and people just like to drink, and you can sway them anyway. So that is sort of the origin of the word cocktail. Now, part of the origin of the word cocktail, one of the stories of the several stories that exist out there on how the word cocktail itself came to be broken up into syllables as cocktail. The story that I really like is the one that really involves New Orleans. And if you've walked into a small town and you walk into a pharmacy and you walk to the back of the shop and you stick your foot up on the bar rail and you stick your head over this like very obscenely tall counter to see if there's anybody back there and if they're actually giants. Excuse me, I'd like to fill my prescription. That is what the original bars were. I mean, that's where the foot rail came from. That's where that level of interaction with the person behind the bar. You'd pay for your elixir of whatever it was that you needed, whether it was stomach bitters or kidney or malaria, or like you had a headache or a toothache or whatever it was, and they served it to you in a cocotte. And a cocotte is an egg cup, and it actually looks a lot like the jiggers that we use now behind the bar, which are the double-sided Japanese jiggers that have like 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces on one side and then about 1 ounce on the other side. And that, is what that original little jigger or egg cup looked like. And that was the vessel that was being used to administer the bitters and the medicine for people when they would walk into the pharmacy. So it's of no surprise that when you catalog sort of the history of Prohibition as well from 1919 to 1933, that the only people that could actually buy alcohol or sell alcohol legally were pharmacists and chemists and the people that had prescriptions for those items. So, I mean, you can see how modern day bartenders would actually have come from exactly who these people were behind like their pharmacy walls and giving people, medicine and administering things to make them feel better. And after all, that's what we still do as bartenders behind the bar every single day. We tell stories and we're administering, some kind of compound to give you instant gratification, and it will last a little longer the more you drink. And so that's sort of where we came from. And that, is over the last 200 years. So when that's the history of the cocktail, but now it's the history of distillation. How did people even figure out how to use alcohol in the first place in such a manner? Where did even alcohol come from? if you've ever taken Bar Smarts or the CSS courses, they cover a lot of the history on where modern techniques for distillation came from. The story that I really like is seems to be duplicated across all mediums of education in our industry, and includes monks that were, walking through Europe and ended up coming to Ireland. And Ireland was one of the first places in the world that had the modern techniques of distillation. But we have to go back even farther than that, because there were 3 vessels or sculptures that were made, in different sizes and shapes, but they all had relatively the same structural look in Turkey, China, and India. And these were the first stills. And those stills are like 5,000 years old. Depending on the temperature, the altitude, several factors when creating alcohol or fermentation or distillation. The only thing that would change with a lot of these vessels is that maybe the base on it would become a little bit more bulbous, depending on how high up it was, or perhaps a little skinnier, or perhaps the swan's neck was a little bit longer, or shaped a little bit differently to have it travel a little bit farther, because spirits and the boiling point of alcohol will happen at different altitudes and different temperatures. So distillation itself is, that would be another shakeup altogether of like 10 hours to talk about distillation. But for the sake of just putting this together in terms of like the prospect of bitters, those stills existed. Now, if you imagine that there's like a cave person, a Neanderthal person of some kind, thousands of years ago, that walks into the forest and picks berries and decides to eat half of them and save the rest because they don't want to go out tomorrow to pick berries. They find a container, they put it in, they cover it. What happens? They come back 1 or 2 days later, and all of a sudden, they eat their berries or the grapes that they put in that container, and now they're high. Why? Because there is a natural fermentation that occurs with naturally occurring yeast in the atmosphere, which exists on the skins of grapes, more importantly on grapes and several other fruits, that eventually a fermentation process will just start automatically. There's nothing you can do about it unless you have a refrigerator. So if you're sick of eating these berries that give you this euphoric drunk feeling, then you're going to try and figure out a better way to consume the product to sort of have that long-lasting euphoric feeling. So now you're going to take these grapes or these berries and you're going to crush them and you're going to drink the liquid. That liquid will eventually become the prototype for wine, because eventually, as you are fermenting fruit and ingredients and you crush them and now you're left with this liquid, well, what are you going to do with it? You're going to store it in a bottle and you're going to drink it around a fire. You're going to drink it while you're inventing fire, like whatever it is. There's, fermentation and the production of alcohol is a very natural occurrence that happens in this world. It's something that can't be helped. It just, things happen. Yeast eats sugar, creates alcohol, and what you choose to do with it after that moment is entirely up to you. So if we've got this idea of distillation, and now it's being taken to, to Ireland and to the United Kingdom and that region of the world, now they're going to start to produce based on what they have around them. If you're in France, you grow grapes. So in France, in Italy, in Spain, they were creating wine because wine was safer to drink than water. There was no purification system at that time for water, so it was oftentimes safer to drink alcohol, which would be an antibacterial for your system. There's lots of people that still say that today about all spirits, and it's kind of true in a matter of speaking. So if you're in the UK, you've got barley. You've got, corn and rye in the US, and you've got rye in Canada. So if you've got all these places in the world where you've got these different ingredients that can be used to make alcohol, then that's what you're going to focus on. But taking something like rye versus barley are very, very different on how you create alcohol from that. So the monks, when they started making alcohol to begin with, they were using alcohol as the extraction and preservation method for lots of ingredients that were around them. So for example, you take chartreuse as a brilliant example. So this chartreuse is 1764. This one is 1838. And then you have the elixir vegetal right here, which is the prototype for the current chartreuse, which is 1605. It took the monks over 130 years from 1605 to 1764 to figure out how to make this recipe, because nobody gave them the ingredients. They just had to figure it out. And now chartreuse is a blend of over 150 herbs and spices and different things, in a proprietary blend that's been arguably made the same way since the 1700s, since the actual recipe came out. And that is what monks were doing, and that's what people were doing. And now, if you want other examples, I mean, in recorded history, we've got chartreuse as a great example. We have Strega as an example. We have Suze, Campari, Ricard, even vermouths. If you were in Italy, then maybe you would be using wine as the base rather than spirit. So now you start creating vermouth and Amaro. You've got like Averna and Punta Mes, and what else do we have? We've got Martini. We have Bonal up at the top. We have Amargo Alberto. We have Amaro Montenegro, Amaro Nonino. Like, there's all sorts of examples for that. So if you're going to look at potable bitters and things that have been around for ages, you know, Fernet Branca is, you know, the middle of the 1800s. We have Jägermeister, which is, you know, over 50 botanicals from 1935 onwards. These are all made in the style of potable bitters, where they're taking a fermentable product that they can make a spirit from and infusing it with ingredients that express the terroir of where they live. So, I mean, you'd be hard pressed, you know, if we're talking about sort of the history of Angostura, you'd be hard pressed to, you know, to say that they were importing products into Venezuela at the beginning of the 1800s to make Angostura. Well, no, they weren't. They had ingredients that were available at that time. I think it's 5 ingredients total in this bottle, and that's what was used to make the Amargo Aromatico for Angostura. And so, you know, if we like sort of rewind a little bit to our talk about Ireland, and I see someone's, hey, shout out from Ireland, very nice. That we've got, you know, this spirit where they're making things with malted barley. So they've got this barley that has a sugar source in it, but it has to go through an enzymatic transformation called malting, or sprouting, as we would call it, like on the West Coast with our, you know, sprouting legumes and things all over the counter. But malting barley is the act of an enzymatic transformation that changes the barley's breakdown into fermentable sugar. So once you sprout it and you've got this little green, you know, stem that comes out of the barley, all of a sudden now you can crush that. You can add water to it, you can add yeast to it, and the yeast will gradually turn that sugar that is in that fermentable starch into alcohol. And that is generally like the very basic history of Irish whiskey, Scottish whiskey, Japanese whiskey. Like, this is anywhere where they're making spirits with malted barley. So if you can very easily make make spirits from these different grains, and of course single grains exist as well. If you want to use, you know, rye or corn to make liqueurs or bitters or whatever it is. I mean, corn is a very, very cheap way to, you know, to make spirit for a very inexpensive bitters or potable liqueur. But, you know, you can go on to make other things with it. So before the act of currency itself, with exchanging paper bills and coins and raw materials like silver and gold and things like that, they were still using things like chartreuse and terroir-specific bitter liqueurs as currency in different regions, you know, in different time periods. So I always use the example of, you know, I would like that goat, and your daughter appears to have a headache. I have this bottle of spirit that will make her headache go away, but I want that goat. And then you exchange. It's like a very simple act of very primitive bartering. So that's basically the history of distillation as it would pertain to bitters. And then we talk about modern. So there are lots of bitters out there, yes, but I'm going to, you know, speak specifically about Bittered Sling. So Bittered Sling Bitters, I did mention that our distillery is 6 hours away from Vancouver in a beautiful place called Vernon, BC, right in the middle of the mountains. When it snows, it's stunning. When it's sunny, it's stunning. It's right in the middle of the Okanagan Valley. So we've got this this beautiful distillery, which essentially opened 14 years ago as a way to process busted fruit that nobody wanted. So Bittered Sling, in turn, is a secondary level recycling program, because Okanagan Spirits creates spirits. They have 28 SKUs of product in their portfolio, and they make product from busted fruit in the Okanagan. An award-winning blackcurrant liqueur, an absinthe, a cherry liqueur, a gin, an aquavit, countless spirits and liqueurs and vermouths and different things like that. So Bittered Sling will use 100% British Columbian grown fruit processed into spirit for the base for every single one of our bitters that we make. We also do not add sugar to our bitters, because we think that you should be the end user. So I'm going to hand you this bottle of plum and root beer bitters, and it's not going to be sweetened at all, because you should be able to control the level of sugar in your cocktail, or not. If you don't even want sugar in sparkling water or in teas or something else, you should be the one that has the ultimate control over the sugar and acidity levels in your cocktail. So the bitters themselves, we're using fruit spirit, generally because British Columbia grows apples and grapes really, really well. We have a thriving, industry out here where you can eat locally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. It is temperate and beautiful out here. You can eat local all year round. We also have a thriving wine industry in the Okanagan Valley. So we are producing an incredible tonnage of grapes and apples and stone fruits and things that, if somebody picks it up at the market and it doesn't look so handsome to them, they're going to put it down and squeeze the fruit that's right next to it and say, ooh, I'll have that one instead. It's very handsome. So for us, that's our recycling program. So all of our bitters are 40% alcohol by volume. All of our bitters are made with the exact same fruit base for all of our bitters. It complements the flavor of all of our bitters, rather than, oh, this tastes like corn versus grapes. You can't taste the difference. It's distilled at such a high level, 96.4% alcohol by volume in a continuous still, that it is alcohol, and we use that as an extraction method. So now that we've sort of covered off distillation, now we're going to talk about, what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about bitters in general, the bitters that you may have heard of, that maybe you know the history of, but you're not really sure. But I love sort of tying this all back to New Orleans as well, because for those that work in the bar industry and the beverage industry in the world, it's really difficult to really trace back history to anything other than New Orleans. You'll find the history of the Penn Dennis Club in Louisville, Kentucky, and the Manhattan from Manhattan, and you'll find different things with the history of product in our industry and specific cocktails. But New Orleans is a very special place because it is one of the first port cities. Even before Confederation happened in the United States, New Orleans was still processing ships and freighters and trade, and it was just perfectly situated. So you had the influence culturally of many different groups from around the world, and that's why Creole and Cajun is so interesting and why it only exists there. It's a blend of the Spanish and the indigenous people and French, and it's such a marvelous place. So when we talk about the history of Angostura, we sort of talked about that very briefly, about just that it came from Venezuela. But how we're going to continue this before we tie it all into New Orleans with our Peychaud bitters is that Angostura is the name of the town in Venezuela. And most people know this story. There's a German doctor by the last name of Siegert that moved to Venezuela from Berlin after medical school and became the Surgeon General of Bolivar's army. And that is where Angostura sort of came from. This was added to soldiers' rations so they wouldn't get sick, or it would prevent sickness and also aid a sickness that was already happening. Now, of course, we all know that today's home for Angostura is in Trinidad and Tobago, and they did move there after a short time at the end of the 1800s. So Angostura, widely available around the world. Then you've got Peychaud, and I love the story of Peychaud. Antoine Amandé Peychaud is the person that created this bitters, and in New Orleans, this was being administered affectionately in the Peychaud's cocktail at a coffee shop which was owned by Sewell Taylor, and Sewell Taylor was bringing in cognac from overseas, and absinthe was still in production at that point as well, and so you could get it. So the combination of a little bit of sugar to balance with Peychaud, absinthe, and cognac was the Peychaud's cocktail, and that was being administered to people in the daytime in little cocottes, and then at nighttime there was rumors that he would turn into a different person and be serving people like these cocktail type beverages. Eventually, you've got Sewell Taylor that realizes that there's more money for him personally in importing product into the United States, and specifically into New Orleans, like cognac, the Sazerac Forget Fils, which is the name of the cognac that was being brought in originally to make the original Sazerac. And then phylloxera happens. Phylloxera is the tiny white aphid that destroyed all of the noble rootstock in Europe for all grapes. So anything that we are consuming as a noble grape, so whether that's Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, Riesling, Gruner Veltliner, Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, like whatever it is, all of those grapes were destroyed. So that's where Ireland came in. Ireland was producing incredible malted barley spirit and poitín, which is the original moonshine, and so they've got all this product. So all of a sudden, they're now supplying whiskey to France, and they're also supplying whiskey to the UK. So the UK is their biggest buyer. So what does that mean for the US? Well, there's no cognac, there's no brandy. So eventually you'd have to make the change. If you wanted to keep your Sazerac cocktail alive, it's going to end up being part, with rye, American rye that they're making on home soil as opposed to cognac. And how it became the name Sazerac eventually, is that cognac originally that was used to make the Peychaud's cocktail helped to create the Sazerac. But also Thomas Handy ended up opening a coffee shop called the Sazerac Coffee House and bought the rights to Peychaud bitters and ended up making that cocktail and with Peychaud bitters. It's still made the exact same way today in New Orleans, and should theoretically be made the same way around the world. I guess a couple of things to note on that is that absinthe eventually became banned in the United States during Prohibition, and the ban on absinthe was only lifted in 2007. So in that time, New Orleans created this incredible spirit called Herb Saint, which is the traditional absinthe style liqueur that is used in making a very traditional New Orleans Sazerac. So today, if any of you are whiskey fans, which I'm sure you are, then you'll know that Buffalo Trace has a Thomas Handy straight rye whiskey as part of their antique collection from their distillery, and Buffalo Trace is still the producer of Peychaud bitters. So it's kind of interesting to see how something that happened so long ago that was so important to the cultural significance of New Orleans as the cocktail capital of the world, basically in history, has now complemented, our current usage of both Peychaud and the Thomas Handy, antique collection whiskey. So that's the history of Peychaud. And there have been lots of bitters that have come out since, but our bitters have been around since, I've been making bitters since 2007, 2008. Bittered Sling started prototypes in 2010, and in 2012, Bittered Sling was available all around the world, and which is really great. And so we've got product in several foreign markets, and we're expanding, and doing something like the project with Tales of the Cocktail has been really marvelous, because this seminar that you're part of right now is part of a 3-hour, very extended advanced version of, the history and modernization of our favorite Modifier, which is a seminar that we teach very, instructionally for bartenders all around the world. And so it's nice to be able to, to offer this type of education to quite an advanced audience. And I do see some questions coming in, and I think, like, before I go any further, I'm just going to answer some of them because some of them are pretty good. I see you here in Cleveland. That's not really a question, but hi. What is the significance of Cuba in cocktail culture? So Cuba is an important place because during Prohibition and during both World Wars, anything that has hurt the economy of the United States, people have gone to Cuba. It's been very, very close. It's literally like an hour away from, you know, the Panhandle in Florida. Cuba itself also is it's the origin of the daiquiri. It's also the origin of one of the first rums that was available in, you know, wide strain around the United States, which would be Bacardi rum, which is now in Puerto Rico, but started in Cuba. To make a classic daiquiri, which is from the Daisy family of cocktails, is white Cuban rum, lime, and sugar to balance. Done. They've also, the mojito, Ernest Hemingway put his stamp on his specific style of daiquiri that he really liked from the Floridita bar, which is the Hemingway daiquiri. So, I mean, Cuba has played a significant part of cocktail culture as well. And, you know, anything that happened during the 1960s, which prevented the U.S. relationship with Cuba to continue forward for a wide variety of reasons, people didn't stop going to Cuba. Cuba's kind of always been around. Okay, so that's the Cuba question. Yes, it seems to be a lot of people having problems with the video. There's no problem on my end. If you see at the top, you've got like a little icon with a camera, then you should be able to click that to take the line away from it, and it should be able to get you going right there. Wow, no questions, eh? Okay, so I guess we're covering everything. That's awesome. But there's lots of nice comments and shout outs from different parts all over the world, and I think it's pretty cool that we can all be here together to talk about all these things. So in terms of, you know, types of bitters, you know, we talk about why would you use, you know, aromatic bitters X over aromatic bitters Y, and why would you use orange versus grapefruit versus cherry versus rhubarb versus whatever. There's like a multitude of bitters available on this planet. So how do you use them? Well, first it's important to understand how we make them. It's not as simple as putting, you know, ingredients into a jar, pouring like high proof alcohol on it and shaking it up and coming back 30 days later and then giving it to your friend. You know, what we always say about bitters is that alcohol is to water, you know, alcohol is in the beverage world as a deep fryer is in the cooking world. Alcohol does produce heat. It produces like this sort of like cooking effect when you add ingredients to it. The higher the content of water in the ingredient, so for example, if you were going to make mint bitters and you were to take a giant bush of mint and you put it in a jar and dump 40% alcohol on top of it, it's not going to give you fresh mint flavor that's gradually extracted. It's going to give you cooked brown mint flavor, and it's not going to be appetizing at all, because the higher the alcohol percentage, now the faster the extraction and the stronger the extraction, but also becomes a cooking time. That's why with certain things, when you infuse, pardon me, when you infuse gin with, say, Earl Grey tea, for example, there's tannins, there's flavor, there's color. So how are you going to extract that? We're not going to leave it in there for 30 days. You're going to leave it in for about 3 hours. 3 hours is enough time to extract just enough tannin that it carries body in the mouth when you add it to a cocktail. It's just enough time to add the aromatics. It's just enough time for the color, and you're going to avoid getting all the bitterness. So every single ingredient is completely different. So, you know, with our Kensington aromatic bitters, we have 25 ingredients in this bitters versus 5 ingredients, right? So with our bitters, you can imagine how much time, care, and attention it takes to research every single ingredient that's going to be in this bottle, that's going to be in this blend, then how those ingredients react together. So how does dandelion and burdock react with sarsaparilla oil and cumin seeds? Why is it that when you add water to Ricard, it goes cloudy? What is it about fennel seeds that has a chemical compound on the outside that not only is aromatic, but causes water to become opaque, where you can't see through it because it's cloudy? different ingredients when they're sitting together in maceration, whether you macerate them separately and then blend liquids together, or you add a recipe of solid ingredients together. It takes time, care, research, and attention. I heard a story once about somebody in the States making bacon bitters and basically taking a raw piece of pork belly, putting it in a container and pouring alcohol on it. And a couple of people got really sick. Just because the whole idea, the simplicity of making bitters to some is about ingredients with alcohol for a period of time, does not necessarily mean that you know what you're doing, you know? So, I mean, for companies that have been researching and doing this for several years, I mean, it's fairly easy to get a do-it-yourself recipe, which is not going to harm anybody. And there are several recipes that are in all of David Wondrich's books. Brad Thomas Parsons wrote the book on bitters. Like, there are lots of different recipes that are safe to make if you would like to try your hand at making bitters at home, and that's no problem. But what we always caution people on is that if you're going to make bitters, that you test it on yourself and you don't test it on other people. The reason why bitters are regulated by provincial and federal governments, both in the States and in Canada and anywhere else, is because alcohol is very dangerous, and they want to be able to control the safety level associated with alcohol, because it's not coming in a bottle like this. It's coming in a bucket from a distillery. So they want to make sure that you're not going to hurt anybody and you're not going to blow anything up, because alcohol is basically a bomb. So I think it's really it's important, number one, to realize that bitters are beautiful and wonderful, but they also can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. So when we're making bitters, we have the hierarchy. This is my shake-up triangle. It's a very nice triangle. At the top, we have the few ingredients. So that would be all your bitter ingredients. So things like cherry bark, dandelion, burdock, gentian, cinchona, angelica root, anything that's going to add that cloying bitterness to the bitters, which will be the thing that makes sure that it translates in oak-aged spirits. So when you add an orange bitters, oh, it's the other owner. So when you add bitters, like an orange bitters, for example, to a Brooklyn cocktail. A Brooklyn is made using whiskey. So whiskey's been aged in wood. So how do you use an orange bitters that isn't very bitter in a Brooklyn cocktail? Maybe you'll get the slight perfume of orange on the nose, but you definitely won't get that ability on the palate that bitters provides, which is bringing ingredients together, drying out the cocktail. You won't get that because the orange bitters are not strong enough. So alternatively, if you've got something like a very light grapefruit bitters and you want to pair it with something, or even a heavy grapefruit bitters, and you add it with fresh herbs. There's a lot of questions now coming in. There's a lot of questions coming in right now with regards to pairing. So as an example, you pair bitters with cocktails and ingredients just the same way as you would with food. So in my mind, I don't think that rhubarb and whiskey go together. I can be swayed either way. If somebody has a great rhubarb and whiskey cocktail they want me to try, then I'll totally try it. So our Shanghai rhubarb bitters, I would never pair it with whiskey, but rhubarb and gin feels right to me. Rhubarb and tequila feels right to me. Rhubarb and white whiskey, rhubarb and pisco, rhubarb and cachaça, rhubarb and white rum. That works for me. So when you're trying to pair ingredients together, that is the first thing that you look for, is how would you pair specific flavor notes together? Do they actually pair? Now, who's to say that you couldn't use different flavors altogether? So if I want to make something like a mole bitters, I mean, Bittered Sling is not going to make a bitters that's called mole, but we can have the ability to pair 1 dash of Malagasy chocolate bitters with 1 dash of Moondog bitters. Or in the case of the Tales of the Cocktail Pack, we take 1 dash of Palermo and 1 dash of Condessa, and that is your mole bitters. If you like your kind of interesting Latin American mole to be a little bit on the citrusy side, do 1 dash of chocolate, 1 dash of Moondog, or the Latin American, 1 dash of orange and juniper, or 1 dash of Le Marrakech, which is roasted Moroccan lemon. There's so many ingredients and different flavors to choose from. Now, just quickly, I see a question about Angostura. Claims to have 40-odd ingredients, and I said 5. When Angostura first came out, it only had 5 ingredients, and I'm sure like over the years they've added more ingredients. But at that time, in Venezuela, there were only 5 ingredients, as what I'm told from the sources that I've read. So in terms of how we would pair things together, so it's fairly easy now that I've explained to you that when you're pairing bitters together, you pair flavors together. And also when you're pairing spirits, you're going to be pairing also, in that same way. So gin with citrus, juniper, hard spices, baking spices, say like Tanqueray, you would want to pair that with like so many different things. It would be great with orange, great with grapefruit, great with lemon. It'd also be great with plum and root beer, and with a variety of different ingredients. So in terms of pairing bitters together, we've done the work to make sure that all of our bitters have the right level of bitterness. And I'm going back to the hierarchy. So that's number 1. The second level of the hierarchy is just a little bit bigger. So we start with our tiny ingredients that you need the least of to make the biggest impact, which are the bittering agents. So the next level down are now your sweet barks. So your sweet barks are anything from like cinnamon to licorice root, because licorice root, before the discovery of sugarcane and sugar beets, was used as an extraction for sucrose. So if you have, licorice bark and you want to do that experiment, you can always chew on it, and it's very, very sweet. It's very licoricey, of course, but it's very sweet. That is an extraction of sucrose that was used at one point in time. So if you've got, your licorice, your cinnamon, your cassia, any like American oak, like those are not bitter enough to take the entire blend of ingredients into a very bitter state when you're making bitters, but they definitely help in terms of elongating the bitterness and starting that balance. Your next level, which is now even more ingredients and more quantity, will be your spices. So this is your allspice, your cardamom, your vanilla, your teas, like anything where there's subtle and beautiful flavors, but they're not going to adjust the balance of bitterness in the bitters. And then your last stage, which you need the most of, are the fresh ingredients. So if you like to add rosemary or thyme or fresh orange and grapefruit peel or lemon peels or whatever that is, that's that last stage. So now you have to understand how these ingredients come together, how they taste together, how long you let it sit for, alcohol levels, all of those things. And that's why making bitters is so complex, because there's never just 1 or 2 ingredients. That would be a tincture, and that's fairly easy to make. If you want to make an apple tincture, you just stick some apples, alcohol, done. But in terms of making something really special that has balance already, that's the other thing. If you try a bitters that doesn't taste good to you, then it's not balanced. And you would never add an imbalanced ingredient to a cocktail, because you've essentially achieved balance with your cocktail, and why would you screw it up by adding a bitters that wasn't balanced? So it's up to us to make sure that we're always providing a bitters and a product that is balanced already in the bottle. And that's why we don't add sugar. It's why we don't add any other ingredients or coloring of any kind. Let's see here, because we're getting towards the end here, so I might just answer a few more questions. If you have questions, please write in now, because we've got about 10 minutes left. And then remember to go to the Tales of the Cocktail Facebook page for your chance to win one of the On Tour gift packs. Producing bitters using machinery, making tinctures is different. Ingredients, blend them together. Yeah, okay, so we sort of talked about this. Everybody will have a different method of making bitters. How Bittered Sling makes bitters is a combination recipe that is macerated for a certain period of time. And that is a tried and true version for us, because we like the relationship that orange has when it's macerating with the juniper, rather than orange by itself and juniper by itself, and then blending tinctures together and then letting those sit for an extended period of time. That is how Jägermeister and Fernet Branca make their make their liqueurs is through, blending tinctures together and caring for things differently. Fairnet has a wide range of machinery and different techniques that they use in order to put their ingredients together, whereas Jägermeister has more of like a tea bag effect. They have all of their ingredients, they macerate them, and then they continuously pour water with this like tea bag of botanicals over and over again until it creates this like very strong bitters, and then in the end it's fortified and with sugar added. So so just as an example, there isn't one right way to make bitters. It's all about the end product. So all of Bittered Sling, we make things very similarly to how Jägermeister would make their liqueur, as an example. Let's see, some more questions. Is there a resource for different ingredient macerations? Bitters are so regulated and guarded that most people will not publish a lot of their findings. I would say that people that have done the work for you, like Brad Thomas Parsons, to put together a book on bitters is really, really helpful. All the seminars that we teach are very helpful. There are more people out there that are passionate about bitters and this whole scientific approach to how you do things with alcohol. But I would say that most people are sort of reluctant to release the information. For us, we do seminars and have food science backgrounds as well, so we're able to to deliver more compelling information and education on singular items to do with bitters. And definitely for maceration times, it all depends on the water content of the ingredients that you're using in your blend, what percentage of alcohol that you're using to macerate, and the ambient temperature of the place that you're macerating your bitters in. So it's usually 30 days with anywhere from 40% to 60%, which will work for people at home, I would say. Which is the base ingredient or botanical for making a bitter? Do you create a skeleton with bitter ingredients and later add the other spices to botanicals? As I mentioned, Bittered Sling has a very specific way of making bitters. We like the reaction and the relationship that ingredients have with one another when they're macerating, so we do things all together. Producing bitters, okay, so we already talked about that. What about the risk of allergic reactions to some of the components in the bitters to the customers? I can speak on, like, in terms of our company, all of our products are registered and regulated with both federal governments for Canada and the United States, which means every single product in every bottle of Bittered Sling Bitters is 100% legal in both countries. Certain things that we don't mention on our labels, because we don't have to, are the specific bitter ingredients that we use. But Bittered Sling does not use anything above and beyond gentian and cinchona bark as the major bittering agents in our bitters. We are always as sort of forthcoming as we can be in terms of ingredients. If people have allergies, we know right away which bitters have, if somebody has an allergy to, to orange peel, we know exactly which ones have orange peel in them, for example. So there isn't really like a database for Bittered Sling on our website where you could search what ingredients are in what bitters, and that is just very simply just sending an email and us getting back to you on that. Oh, there's somebody that came in late and would like me to start from the beginning. I think it's important to know, anyone that came in late, that this will be published onto the Tales of the Cocktail YouTube page after we're done. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to just quickly wrap up here and let everybody know that if you haven't been to Tales of the Cocktail before, you're definitely missing out on one of the quintessential parts of not only North American cocktail culture, but also the history of cocktail culture in the world. And if we were to talk about, in terms of what people are attending Tales of the Cocktail, it's a combination of bartenders, enthusiasts, apprentices, brand owners, and people that are interested in starting brands. It's really a one-stop shop for people to meet each other that is in this incredible industry. Like, 25,000 people come to New Orleans every year for this festival. I would say that anybody interested in Bittered Sling, I would love to hear from you. On our website, Bittered Sling com, and that has an ed on the end because it's named for, you know, the history of the cocktail. So bitteredsling.com. If you have any interest in any of our flavors, we have a full description of all of our flavors on the website, as well as the Tales of the Cocktail gift pack, which is available through the Tales of the Cocktail website as well, talesofthecocktail.com, and you'll be able to purchase. If you don't get a chance to win this pack today, you'll definitely be able to buy it on their website and in select markets across Canada and the US. Let's see, somebody else wrote in with another question here. They did. Maybe it's gone now. I think it's gone. Okay. I really appreciate everybody tuning in today. And, you know, oh, there was a question about Strega. Someone asked a question about Strega, but I'm having trouble finding it. So Strega, which has oftentimes been used as sort of like a similar replacement for something like yellow chartreuse. These are more subtle, sort of vanilla, saffron, like liqueurs that are a little bit easier on the palate as opposed to your, you know, 55% green chartreuse. But the subtleties of this work in such a way with bitters and other ingredients in cocktails to bring out the best in spirits. And that's why we use bitters as well. So if you were to use plum and root beer bitters as an example in a Negroni, we're not trying to add bittering flavor to a Negroni because Campari is the bitter agent. However, if you were to add 1 dash of plum and root beer bitters, it all of a sudden brings out an incredible sensation where you're tasting all of the plum and root beer sort of accented tasting notes of the vermouth, which has 30 ingredients, of the Campari, which has several ingredients, of, you know, even of the gin that has several botanicals. So it complements and blooms all the ingredients that are in the cocktail. And so that's a great way to remember how to use it. All of our citrus bitters, definitely, they love white spirits, and they love accents when used with other aromatic bitters, and also love fresh ingredients. So if you're making mojito style cocktails, anything with mint, with basil, cilantro, the citrus bitters are really love that. Any of our aromatic bitters go really well, obviously, with an appropriate, you know, oak-aged spirit of your choosing. So, for example, the Moondog or the Condesa bitters, which are sort of Latin American inspired, those go really well with Latin American ingredients. They go really well with tequila, with mezcal, with sotol, with anything that sort of has that edge to it. And on the same hand, anything that is produced in the hot climates of the southern U.S., or the Caribbean, or northern South America. You've got all of these spirits which are paired with terroir. So if your rums are being created with molasses or sugarcane juice, depending on where you're getting your rum from, they will have specific tasting notes to them. And our bitters work well with so many of them. The plum and root beer bitters also acts as a tiki bitters, and it works really well in tiki cocktails like, you know, fog cutters, painkillers, like even a pina colada, to make that taste really exceptionally delicious and bring out the best in the rum and whatever coconut product you're using. Also in Mai Tais, in, you know, in daiquiris, and in basically anything. Kensington aromatic bitters goes great as a full-on replacement for an aromatic bitters, and can be used in anything. When we make our sazeracs, you know, which are made with Peychaud bitters, classically, we use either the New Orleans French Quarter bitters, or we use the Bittered Sling cherry bitters as our replacement for that red bitter in that cocktail. If you have something like a Vieux Carré, which we're going to use equal portions of, you know, like a red gentian bitters as well as an aromatic bitters, then we use, you know, equal parts of Souyuz cherry or the French Quarter bitters against Kensington bitters. We love Malagasy chocolate bitters with cognac. We love our celery, Cascade celery bitters with sherry, with sake, with bourbon, with vermouth, with whatever it is, in a Rob Roy or in a Champs-Élysées with yellow chartreuse and cognac. And very simply, we love adding the flavor components of bitters, which are so complex, to everything. You can cook with them. You can add them to sparkling water, to tea, to zero-proof cocktails. It's really a very exciting thing. So, and I think that sort of wraps it up. Any more questions? Going once? Going twice? I would love to hear from all of you. So if you would like to follow along on Instagram at Lauren Mote, and on Twitter the same. Bittered Sling can be found on Instagram and also on Twitter at bittered_sling, and of course Facebook pages as well. I'd love to hear from all of you. Any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ever send me a message. And it's been a delight sharing all of this with you today, and hope to see you on the Tales of the Cocktail Facebook page, and hopefully you all get to win that amazing cocktail bitters companion celebrating all of the on-tour programming that we've been to around the world with Tales of the Cocktail. Thanks very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.